Another type of regression is a quadratic. Quadratics are, remember, in the form of a parabola. So it could either look like this or like this. An upside down U or a right side up U, just depending on the situation. When we think of a parabola, we need to think of something that's, if we're looking at the one on the left, we need to think of something that's going up and then coming back down, or something that's falling and then going back up. It just kind of depends on the situation. So for instance, if you're shooting a basketball, it's going to have that arch shape of a parabola when it hits the hoop. That right there is a quadratic. Now, a quadratic, remember, is in the form of f of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c. And this information is useful because the a, the b, and the c all relate to different parts or characteristics that we need for a parabola. Now, remember that we can use the a, b, and c with the quadratic formula in order to determine the zeros. And I'll give you the quadratic formula because I have a feeling you might need a refresher. It is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Again, that's where your zeros are located. Some of you might not remember this, but that's okay. The vertex, also known as the min or the max, depending upon what type of parabola you have, if it's upside down or not. The vertex is located, the x value is located at negative b over 2a. The y value is then wherever you plug in your x value. And this is good information in order to determine that min or max. So let's talk about, how to look at and find certain characteristics based on our equation. And this is going to give you a rough idea of what your graph is going to look like. So for instance, let's say that we have the graph f of x equals 2x squared minus 3x minus 2. So right now, without even having a graphing calculator or without having Desmos, we have the option of figuring out our zeros and our vertex just based on this information alone. Now, remember that the number in front of the x squared determines whether it's right side up or if it's upside down. Because it's a positive a, we know our graph is going to look like this. Obviously, if it was a negative a, it would be the reverse. So let's go ahead and find our zeros. So we have, using the quadratic formula here, we've got 3 plus or minus the square root negative 3 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 2 divided by 2 times 2. So I'm just going to simplify this again. If you remember from years or prior times that I've taught this, I should say, we do everything in the square root first, just because it kind of gives us a better idea of what's actually happening there. So if we look at that, we'd have 9 plus 16, which is going to give us that 25 over 4. We'll reduce it now. And the reason why I like to just simplify underneath the square root is because it might not come out to a perfect square and I might have to reduce it a little bit further. So x equals 3 plus or minus 5 over 4, which we can then split. 3 minus 5 over 4, which will give us negative 1/2. And then the other one, 3 plus 5 over 4, gives us a solid 2. So right now we have zeros located at negative 1/2 comma 0 and at 2 comma 0. I want to find my vertex yet, and then we'll try to graph it off of that. The vertex. So again, this formula is negative b over 2a. So I'm going to have 3 over 2 times 2. So the vertex point is located at the positive 3/4, but I got to plug it back into the original in order to figure out the y coordinate. If you plug that in, it'd be at a negative 50 over 16. Not a nice number to graph with, but it is what it is. So our vertex is located at 3/4, negative 5 over 16. If you're curious about decimals, sometimes it's a little bit easier to understand. All right, so we've got our 0 points and we have the vertex. Now, how is that going to help us? That's going to help us because when we're looking at our graph, we have points to base this off of. All right, so my 0 points are at negative 1/2, 0, and at 2, 0. So I've got my 0 points plotted. The next point I'm going to plot is the vertex, which was at 0.75 and then negative 3.125, so roughly here. Well, now I've got the U shape that I need. I know it kind of looks like a V right now, but you got to make it so it's that U. And there's my quadratic. Again, use your vertex and your 0 points in order to figure out what the shape of the parabola will be and what it's going to kind of look like. Also, we will be talking about regression. This is something, again, that I will be doing in class, just so you guys have the graphing calculators in hand. Otherwise, you're going to be asked to find the domain and range of this stuff, and we've already talked about it enough that you should already know domain and range, how to find it based off of a graph. Otherwise, you're just going to be looking for those zeros, the vertex, and determining what that graph shape is.